Hi, I'm Risha Grant, and welcome to my show, Just Us. We live in a world of us versus them. Many people believe this is due in large part to our current political climate. The truth is, the civil rights movement never ended, especially for those affected by inequality. The myth that our problems revolve around race, gender, age, religion, sexuality, and all of our differences is wrong. The issue is people and our inability to accept those differences. Now, we know, ladies, that we're going to be the ones to solve this problem. So I've invited you to my show to talk about it. So let me introduce the world to the ladies here. I have Sharon Malone, who works in the corporate world and has been for many years, the mother of 3. Ali Shaw, who's been in the entertainment industry for many years, also a mother of 1. Ariel Davis, who works in the nonprofit sector, and Ariel will be hosting her own show in 2020 called Focus Black Oklahoma, so congrats on that. And then we have Megan Wynn, who works for a local small business and is newly married. Now, these 2 ladies are our millennials here. So you have a whole different set of issues. Y'all old, but that's okay. no, we're all around the same age. But yes. Ladies, so with all the issues going on in the world, I really think women are going to play and need to play a huge part in that. But let's be real. Relationships between women are fragile. Now, you introduce race into it, it's a totally different level of complexity. And I want to talk about that. I want to dive into that a little bit because I feel like we have to deal with that before we can start speaking to the people and starting to create that change. So do we have a general mistrust, or have you had an experience that speaks to a mistrust with women?
I think women as a whole, we come together to try to resolve issues, but in that resolution, we all are strong-minded. We all have our own ideals, our own agendas, and sometimes those issues cause trust issues. For example, if you're speaking on a subject that you feel like you're qualified to speak on, and you have another individual stepping into the scene of that and overpowering your thoughts or overpowering your opinions, then there becomes a what's your agenda? I thought we were going to work together, and now it looks like you're trying to overpower me or take credit for something. So I think as women, when we come together, we have to understand to take our own personal aspects out of it. And if we're going to work together, we're going to work together and not push our own agendas while we're trying to work together.
All right.
I think it's about being open-minded and listening to the other side. Like you said, someone that's coming in that may or may not have their own agenda. Just with humans in general, I'm checking you from the very beginning. Like,
right.
I don't know about you just yet. But there is this underlying thing with women. For my personal, I want to support a woman fully from jump. However, it's something that's been instilled in us, I think, from when we were small. It seems that they pit us against each other a lot of times.
Who is they?
People, but I want to say men primarily. I've experienced it most times with men.
Okay.
And I don't like it. And so I do everything that I can to show them, I'm not going to let that happen. I want to support the women that are in my life professionally, personally, and build them up and pick them up and hold them up. So,
well, let me introduce race into it. First of all, you all have friends of different races. Does that cause more or less distrust?
I think for me, I vet my personal friendships pretty well. And I have friends of all different racial backgrounds. So I think there's more trust that kind of builds my hope that I can have relationships in other spaces that aren't personal, that are more professional. But just kind of going back to what Ali was saying earlier, there are powers that be that influence the interactions. I think if women took a woman's perspective or a woman's approach in any space, which is like collaboration, consensus building, things like that, then there would be lots of trust between us. But I think we take a very male dominant view, because so much of the professional spaces that we're in are dominated by men, that it seems the way to get ahead in those spaces is to emulate men's behaviors with competition and maybe leading from a place of ego, or just leading from a place of maybe I'm not qualified to do this, but I have the belief. So that's something that we could take from that for men's framework, like having belief in yourself, but also there's collaboration, there's consensus building, there's adding a lot of different voices to the table to make sure that, you know, we're emulating some of the values that women have. And if we do that, I think we have a lot of trust with each other. But we're so busy trying to play the game that we don't know who we can trust in this game because we're not playing by our rules.
That's so accurate. I feel like, to me, the competition part resonates with me, because I think even as kids, you know, as we grow older and we become teenagers and we start to see women who are so beautiful, or go-getters, or girl bosses who start to really take charge of their life, we feel like we have to compete, because this is a man's world, and we are just trying to make it and survive. And automatically, I think our brains are trying to protect us from getting hurt, protect us from anything outside in our world that may hurt us. And ultimately, I see that women are the ones that get pitted against each other, because there's fewer of us, you know, as a minority. We are just trying to survive. And when these things are instilled in your brain as a kid, how do you know any better? How do you learn any better until you're exposed to, hey, this isn't that bad. Women aren't that scary. Women aren't out to get each other. We just want to support each other in the end. It's the outside, it's the external circumstances that are pressuring us to see us as bad guys, see each other as bad guys.
Well, do you think we have like the scarce mentality, where there's a scarcity of women in position to help other women? So I also think about this with people of color, because you don't have a lot in these positions that they can hire, they can make things better. And so what happens is, it's like, I had to be careful who I help up, because if I help this person, either they may take my position, or they may do something wrong, and then I'm going to be blamed for that for the rest of my life, and you know, and I lose some cool points or some trust points or whatever it is. So you think we're employing a scarcity mentality amongst ourselves?
Absolutely. I think anytime that there's a perception that there's a scarcity of power or resources, you're going to have people competing for those things, because it feels like there's not enough to go around. And just to add to your point about race, I think some of the worst forms of patriarchy that I've experienced just in my personal and professional life have been perpetuated by white women who have sort of bought into the narrative of white men, of what success looks like, how you measure it, who should be included in the conversation, who is too low on the hierarchy to be included in the conversation. And so I find that sometimes in even my personal and professional relationships with white women, trying to unpack who their loyalty is to based on how they identify themselves, like, do you identify more with your race, or do you identify more with your gender? Sometimes it's difficult to know where that loyalty is going to be, and it's difficult because I'm a person that wants everybody to own every part of their identity. You should be able. I want to be able to own my blackness just as much as I own my womanhood. But I find that I'm put in a lot of situations where I feel like I have to make a choice. And for me personally, I always choose to go with my Black identity first.
So let's talk about that for a second. That's really interesting. Why do we have to identify with anything other than who we are?
Because we work in these power structures that, from just even applying for any position, you have to identify yourself as something. And how you identify yourself, there's an image that a person conjures about who you are and how you engage with the world.
But are we feeding into that? I mean, Allie, you work for I work for a black radio station.
This is when you started talking on this subject, this is when the little girl in me who was always a dreamer of, I just want everyone to be the same color. I just wish we could all be the same in a lot of ways, but then I appreciate our differences. And so can I talk on a personal level? I work at a black radio station, but my daughter is half black. So from the time, I found out I was pregnant, the first thing, my mother said to me was like, oh, it's going to be so hard for her and for you. And she was so concerned. And I said, but I'm her mom. And it's okay. Like we got this, her and her dad. And from the time that she first said, like what color am I, she started asking the questions, and we would say, well, you're beautiful. We really didn't identify with that. But then eventually we had to have those conversations. And she came home one day and said something about, well, that black girl. And I said, what do you think you are? Because you're black too.
Right.
Even though you spend most of your time, at this point, her dad and I were not together anymore, but it's such a difficult conversation to have, but at the same time, I'm happy that it's happening now, because if you really want to break it down, a lot of us are mixed with many different races.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's just a more obvious thing because of the contrast. So yeah.
But is identity keeping us separated? Because here's the thing, you mentioned we're all mixed with a lot of things. I did my ancestry DNA a few years ago. Y'all, I'm 20% white.
Wow.
That's a lot.
Yeah, I'm so scared now.
That's a lot. And I thought, I had to make a couple of phone calls, right? Because I thought 20%, that's a whole fifth. It's a whole fifth. And if you think back to the day when we really dealing with issues of slavery, if you had a fifth, that. So I was like, but it wouldn't have mattered, because I will be seen as yes. I wouldn't have been, because of the color of my skin. I would have never passed.
Right.
But that, I think we put so much into identity. I think you were going to say something, Sharon.
Well, so when we talk about the narrative of figuring out who you are, the narrative coming in saying there's a difference between women and then their race, I can go back and think of a story when I was in middle school, when race was really became an issue for me. We had a new student who had come to our school. She was from another state, and all the other girls had not befriended her. Well, I count myself as the one that's going to befriend the new person, so I became her friend, and she was having a slumber party, and she had invited me to her slumber party, and I was extremely ecstatic to be able to attend a slumber party. The day before the slumber party, she came and told me that I couldn't attend, and I thought, oh, what happened? Did you get in trouble? Did your mother decide that you couldn't have a party? And she said, no, I just can't invite you. And I thought, oh, okay, I didn't understand, but I said, okay. So that next Monday when we all came back to school, some of my other peers are talking. Oh, we had so much fun at this party. And this is, their house is huge. And I thought she couldn't have the party. And then they said, well, what do you know about the party? And I said, well, she invited me. She invited you? You couldn't come to her party. Well, why? And then they looked at each other as if I was missing the joke.
Right.
You're black. Okay, I like parties. Black people like parties. We like parties. I think that was the first time in my life that I didn't feel accepted, or I felt like I was different than somebody else. I grew up in a small town, and there were black people, white people, Indian people, all around us, and we were all inclusive. But that was the first time that I understood that I was different from somebody, and I wasn't going to be included in the pack because I was different.
And that's hurtful, because
it was very hurtful.
I guarantee you, if you and this little girl were friends, it had to be something at home that said to her.
Right.
And that's, let's talk about that for a second. We grow up and we live through the past hurts and experiences of the people who raised us. And sometimes it's for a good reason, they've had some things happen and they don't want to see their kids go through it, but it hurts us. It keeps us in a us versus them paradigm. What can we do next? We can't continue to live through that.
I feel like, and just kind of echoing what you're saying, whether you self-identify or somebody identifies it for you as being other, it puts this sort of pressure on you where you can't really explore other parts of your identity the way that you want to. Like, there's a certain way to be black in this country, there's a certain way to be white in this country. If you engage in behaviors that don't meet other people's expectations or whatever narrative they have in their mind, like associated with those words, like you are left with this sort of like identity crisis where you're like, okay, who am I really? Who am I beyond being a black woman? But I spend so much of my time fighting for that identity to be humanized and valued that I don't get to fight for like my introverted side or my nerdy side. So kind of going back to your original question, just like, is identity hurting us? I would say, in some ways it is. It's a double-edged sword for me because in some ways it's so empowering for me to like get on Facebook and see Black Girl Magic and see melanin popping, and for me to see myself reflected in other people in positive ways. But it does become like my central story in a way that I don't know if it would be if I was a part of the dominant culture, if that makes sense.
And I would agree with that. So many times we want to show our deeper, our inner sides. You know, I'm adventurous. You know, I want to be. I'm an inside actress. I have all these other components that I want to share to the world. But before I can share to them, I have to explain why I'm Black, or I have to say, okay, I have to think differently because I'm Black, and that should never be. I sit right here next to Allie. Allie's another person. I'm not envious of her because of her color. I'm not envious of her because of what she does. If we can have that same mindset going forward, that you're a woman, I know who you are, authentically you're a woman, and we're gonna work out things together, we can move forward. But if I have to stop and say, oh, Allie, the white girl, we've just changed. And I think that's probably what comes against
And we
us.
do that a lot.
We do that.
We do that. Instead of just saying this person, the white girl,
Yes,
the Hispanic
we have
boy,
to identify what's
yeah.
on the
Say,
surface.
I do not.
That's
Not
good.
the way I
As a
think,
society.
but I
That's
know
good
what
as a
you mean.
society,
Yeah,
yeah.
like
Yeah.
it's my goal to get everyone to do that.
I think we have too many boxes, like too many boxes, and I just wish we'd just throw it in the recycling, because when we start putting people in boxes and start defining who they are for them, we're limiting them, and we're limiting them from being who they are fully. And I think, you know, like I've had a hurtful experience with Black women that really hindered my ability to have relationships with them up until I was in college, where I wasn't included. I was on the basketball team who wasn't included, and I quit basketball because of it. Wow. And to this day, if I were to see any of those girls, we would say hi, we would be cool, we're friends. But I don't think they realized that they hurt me. And honestly, that was on me for not expressing my hurt. Right. But I think too, we don't do a good enough job of teaching kids too, as when they're young, that, hey, you're hurt. It's okay to express your hurt. Right. It's okay to have conversation. Let's get rid of these boxes. Let's open up a table where we can sit and just talk. That's what we don't teach young enough.
Very true. And as we wrap this up, thing is, it's going to take each one to teach one. My feeling is that we approach it from a micro level of the people in your circles where you can really make a difference. And we see those circles grow outward as we continue to touch people. And there are things about ourselves that we've had to radically accept. Meaning, if I don't accept this about myself, or let me put it like this, I may have to lose everything to gain myself as who I am as a person. I have to, you know, maybe not believe what my parents taught me, maybe not believe what my grandparents taught me, and what I know to be true for myself. I want to ask each of you one thing that you would radically accept about yourself that could help create change. And I'll start with you, Sharon. You look like you're thinking it through.
I know, I am thinking it. Because I try the approach of treat people the way you want to be treated, regardless of who you are. But I can say that if I take the time to authentically try to get to know someone instead of using my biases from things that I've grown up with, or just things that I've collected over the years, if I can honestly look at you and say, let's unpack who we are before I can try to put things on you that don't belong, that's what I can contribute.
Okay.
Mine is a kind of a continuation. I like to say that I feel like I'm the bridge to a gap because of what I do for a living and where I work and the type of people I work with daily, but still remembering I'm a white woman. I have white privilege. If I got pulled over right now for speeding down the street, they're probably not going to question me like they would my Black friend. So still remembering that I have that, but using my voice more to speak against those things, that privilege that I have that I don't really want sometimes.
Awesome. Ariel?
I guess the commitment I would make to myself is to keep in the forefront of my mind that I am more than the world tells me I am, and I can do more than what they say that I can do. And I think that just personal self-work is my contribution and example to anybody who identifies with any part of my identity, whether that's the Black, the woman, the introvert, or whatever. You can make a space for yourself in this world and show up as who you are, and that's completely enough. And there's a host of people waiting out there for you to show up exactly who you are, and that's enough.
Awesome.
I think my commitment is going to be giving myself a mindset of not everyone's out to hurt me. Not everyone is out to make me feel bad. Not everyone is trying to bring me down. I think that's always been my reservation, is I come to a conversation and I already feel hurt. And that's not fair. You know, I haven't even given the opportunity for someone for them to be able to be trusted. Right. And I want to trust people. And I think essentially that's what I'm working on, is a simultaneous healing with giving chances to people.
Thank you, ladies. We have to remember that it's just us for justice. We're gonna have to figure it out, and then each one teach one. So I think we all owe it to the world to leave it a better place than we found it. So thank you so much for your openness and your honesty. That was great.
Thank you.
Thanks.